Okay, so I walked around the room a little bit and tried to talk to a few folks and introduce myself, and I knew some of you, and some of you I kind of had met once or twice, but not too much. And I asked a couple of you what you were hoping to get out of the presentation today. And some of you was like, I'm just here to enjoy. And some of you, I have some specific questions that I hope to get answered. And so we'll try to cover all that. We'll try to cover some of the rules, and we'll try to cover some of the specific questions. And also we'll try to keep it entertaining. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about how much I enjoy doing Summits on the Air with friends. And I have a specific friend that I'm going to talk about today, but there are multiple people that I have done Summits on the Air activations with, and I truly enjoy the company. And Brad, for example, my good friend Brad, is one of those that I recently have just been doing some activations with. He's great. Let me see if I can advance this. Yeah. So first of all, just kind of a high-level overview of Summits on the Air, some things that I find interesting today, and that is that SOTA and POTA and other field ops have really grown a lot in the ham radio community over the last, well, SOTA actually started about 20 years ago now, but and then, you know, Parks on the Air is more recent in 2018. But there's been a lot of growth, and with that growth, there's been a lot of development into new technologies, the different radios and antennas, and we're really living, in my opinion, in a golden age of portable QRP operations. So I'm excited about that. One of the things is that I wanted to mention is that SOTA was founded March of 2002, so that's quite a while ago, more than 20 years ago, by John Linford. And I just wanted to make sure, even though I don't even know if he lives still or not, but I just wanted to recognize him because of how important this program is, G3WGV. And 210 active associations now to date around the world. Started in Europe, in Great Britain. The SOTA community currently has 34,781 participants, and about 7,000 of those are in the United States. And we pale in comparison to how fast and how the POTA community has grown and how many POTA, Parks on the Air, participants there are. There's 500,000 participants since 2018, so they've grown a lot. But that's okay. You know, I think most of us in here probably do Parks on the Air as well from time to time. All portable ops is great. Okay, so I've learned over many years of participating in Summits on the Air that everybody kind of walks their own path. Everybody has a different path to their enjoyment in Summits on the Air. I'm going to see if I can pull this mic off here. So one thing that, well, there's just some contrasts here that I wanted to point out. So, for example, you know, some people like the mountaineering, the really tough, hard hikes, Sierra Nevadas, for example. Adam loves those, K6ARK. And then there's the drive-ups, and I love those. You know, you just drive a little bit, you get on top, and you just hop out of the vehicle, make sure you're not using the vehicle, and you're good to go. And everything in between. So there's also solo hikes and solo activations, and then there's group activations. There's the routine where you have all your gear the same every time, and you have the same peaks you do every time. But then there's those who like to mix it up, try a different antenna every time, try a different peak, and all this stuff. There's the commercial gear that we all like, but then there's the homebrew stuff and making our own antennas and kits. And then there's also the social aspect that people get out of it, you know, hiking with people and the interaction. But then there's also the competition, or the self-competition, I should say, the points and the gratitude of achieving things in Summits on the Air. So again, it's very broad, and everybody has a different approach, and that's what I love about Summits on the Air. So another little aspect of Summits on the Air and personal growth is, I think, this doesn't necessarily follow in exact order, but a lot of times when we first start thinking about Summits on the Air, we're thinking about, how do I do this? What radio do I use? What antenna do I use? And it's a lot of questions and trying to get everything ready. And then you kind of get into it, and it's like you're going and you're figuring out the gear. And then when you reach about 800 points, then it's like, I'm going to go and do 5 summits every day until I'm done. It's maybe not that much, but you get excited about getting that goat. Then on the other hand of that, you've got a lot of people who are in the shack who really like to chase and enjoy that as well. Some other things, some people start with sideband. Some people already know Morse code. And some people will say, oh, everybody's on Morse code. Let me try it. Some people try it and say, no, this isn't for me, and they stay with sideband. Love it. That's okay. And then other people take that CW journey and incorporate that into their Summits on the Air experience. There's evolving gear. There's people who just like to do it for pile-ups. And so as you participate and as your journey goes on, you find different things that you enjoy about Summits on the Air, kind of a microcosm of the same way things are in ham radio. You know, if we don't always just do VHF and ham radio, we branch out and do other things. And so eventually, a lot of us will give back to the community. And I know a lot of us here have done that. Paula, for example, she does all kinds of wonderful things for her people in her community and outside the community. It's just a great community that we have here with the SOTA folks. And I love the meetups. I love the campouts. And we've really grown in our opportunities to have social interaction with each other. So thank you for that. So the last thing is give me bigger adventures. I have that on the list last because that's kind of the thing I've been focusing my SOTA journey on of late. It's, you know, the points, not so much anymore. I like the social aspect, and I also like finding some challenges, ways to challenge myself beyond just getting the points. And so today I wanted to talk to you about a couple of trips that I had in the Navajo Nation and share those experiences with you a little bit. So a few interesting facts about the Navajo Nation. It's the largest reservation in the United States. It's 27,000 square miles of land. And it's located mostly in Arizona, but also a lot in New Mexico and a little in Utah. And it's self-governing. It's a self-governing nation, and they have their own laws. And some of them are very interesting. Total population, about 400,000 since 2021. And one of the things why this is a challenge is, why I have had this as a challenge is because if you're not a member of the Navajo Nation and you want to activate a summit there, you have to have a valid permit from the Navajo Nation, or you have to have a guide or friend take you on the activations. And, you know, some people have activated outside that and we're okay. I mean, it's, you know, some people forgot the rules or whatever, didn't know, no big deal. But that's if you want to do it right, that's the way you do it. And so there's a few people, like I said, activated it on the reservation, but there's very few summits in the reservation, the Navajo Nation, that have been activated. There's a few. And so I'm like, this is a great place maybe for me to do some first-time activations. I have a great friend who lives up there who has kind of been my guide, and I've went on activations with and actually introduced him. So here's a little map of where I'm talking. So if you look at the map here on the right, that's where Arizona is, for those of you who are really challenged with the United States. And then the map on the left is the property, or the boundaries, I should say, of the Navajo Nation. It doesn't touch Colorado, or it doesn't go into Colorado, you can see. And you can see how it kind of really extends to the right into New Mexico quite a bit. The governing council is actually in New Mexico, and even though the largest portion of the area is in Arizona. And then there's this little piece in the middle that's kind of like a little island, and that is the Hopi Reservation, which is a completely different governing body and completely different tribe than the Navajos. So here's Herb and myself. We were doing an activation. Herb, N7HG. Some of you may know him from another area, but I introduced Herb to Summits on the Air. I heard that he was interested in doing Summits on the Air, and so this was kind of a win-win. I thought, I'll introduce him to Summits on the Air, and he can take me to the summits that have never been done. And it worked out good. Just a little bit about Herb. His father was a code talker, and so his involvement in ham radio has been, once his father passed away, he thought, how am I going to honor my dad, who was a Navajo code talker, with his service? And he thought about it quite a bit, and then he realized what I can do is I can do a special event, call sign, and do some special events that recognize the code talkers through ham radio. And so even though the code talkers didn't use ham radio, they used code, but a different kind of code than CW. So the Navajo Code Talker special event call is N7C. Every September, Herb goes to the Navajo Nation in Window Rock, the capital, and he does a special event for, I think he does about a week, where he uses that special call sign, and he does it at it's one of the few places that actually celebrates still the Navajo Code Talkers. They have a Navajo Code Talkers Day at Window Rock, and there's a big monument there that recognizes the code talkers, and he sets up his station there and he operates. And I also use that same call sign on summits on the air and do some summits also, and then I'll send those logs to him, and he'll send out the QSL cards and the recognition that people get for participating. He also does in Arizona and in New Mexico, he'll go to Hamfest, and he has these really beautiful displays that describe how the code talkers, what they did, how they participated in World War II, and a little bit have pictures of his dad and how his dad participated, and so I think that's great. And then he also does presentations, and he'll do them online too. So if you are somebody who's a part of a club and you are interested in maybe learning more about the Navajo Code Talkers, then you can invite him to be a presenter for you. Okay, so I was interested in doing some never-before-activated summits, and so here's the 3 listed that I wanted to do: Roof Butte, Matthews Peak, and Yale Point. And it turns out that Matthews Peak was already done, but that's all right. It's a drive-up, so, I mean, why not do it, right? So the first arrow here on the left is where he lives, where Herb lives. It's called Lukachukai. And I was driving there, and I drove through Chinle, which is a very small town with one Walmart and a couple of fast food places, and that's about it. And I headed towards his place, and I didn't pass many things on the way. And I finally got to Lukachukai, and there was one store. It was a post office / convenience / grocery store, and that was it. And then the rest were just a few little houses, and so he lives in a very small, very rural area. And so I called him, and I said, I'm on my way. I'm going to come to visit. And he said, okay, well, you can stay on the couch. And I'm like, that's great. He lives in a trailer. And I said, okay, I'll be there around 5 p.m. And this was 3 days before. And he goes, okay, sounds great. So then I arrived at 5 p.m. and nobody was around. And so I said, hey, Herb, where are you? And he goes, oh, I'm in New Mexico right now. You'll have to wait a couple hours. So I sat in my car and waited for him for a couple hours, and it got dark, and then he finally pulled in, and I said to him, it was kind of a little weird out here in the middle of nowhere. There's a lot of shadows and stuff like that, you know, behind I saw something behind my truck, and he goes, oh, those are the skinwalkers. And I'm like, oh. So anyway, that was interesting. So the next day we went and we did this drive up, Roof Butte. And you can see in Arizona, Arizona has some beautiful areas. We have pines, and we have some high mountains, but we also have low desert and very ugly territory. Maybe in your opinion, maybe not. I love the desert. But this is Herb and I on top of Roof Butte, and that picture there is the Chuska and the Tanicha mountain ranges. And when you're looking south from Roof Butte, you'll see this is what you look at and what you see. And when you look from Roof Butte, when you look to the east, you see a thing called Shiprock. And it's really interesting. It's just it's a sacred little monument, and it's in New Mexico, actually. We're on a peak in Arizona, and we look and we can see Shiprock in New Mexico. It's pretty interesting. And then here we are activating. Herb is, since it's a drive up, we were able to put all out a chair and have a good time. But let me just do this video here real quick. I don't know if you'll get the audio or not. Maybe not, but it doesn't matter. I just wanted to kind of show you what it looks like there in the back a little bit. It's a beautiful mountain up there. All right. There's some radio towers up there, but that's all right. Oops. So when we went up to Roof Butte, we activated that, had a great time. We actually used VHF and were able to make a contact with somebody in Durango, Colorado, and somebody in New Mexico, and somebody in Flagstaff, Arizona. It was great, on 2 meters. It was a really fun activity. Then we left and we went to what was going to be our first never-before-activated summit, Matthews Peak. And what we did was we traveled south from Roof Butte along a dirt road to what we thought was Matthews Peak. And along the way, there were some really interesting things. And Herb talked to me about this, about how when he was young, his family used to live in Chinle, a bigger town than he's in, and they had sheep and other livestock, and his grandmother and his mom and his family would take the livestock up to this area in those mountains in the summer, and he spent summers up there living, and then in the winter they would take them back down. But he said that he lived in hogans, and that there was no running water, it was just a camp. And that's how he lived each summer. And you can see here on the upper right, this is kind of a well-built hogan. There's a lot of these up in that area and also in all parts of the Navajo Nation. It's just a octagon-looking, one-room building. And sometimes they'll have like gas stoves. Are you okay? Okay. It was a cheap chair. All right, so I'll draw attention this way so he doesn't. Anyway, so over here you can see another hogan in the middle, and then the fence that they make out of these little twigs and stuff like that. And this one on the right bottom is just kind of some of the valleys that we drove through. Very beautiful. And he said they were full of livestock and sheep and stuff. So it was interesting. This is kind of a look at the drive. On the right is the 40-minute, 10-mile drive, which is actually turned into about instead of a 40-minute drive, it was closer to an hour-and-a-half drive to get there. And on the left, you can see the blue line is the line that we should have taken. And the red line is the line that we did take to drive to the top of Matthews. And in that square there, in the black, that's the peak that Herb said was the top of Matthews Peak. And I said, "You're sure that's Matthews Peak?" Before we left, and he said, "Yeah, this is Matthews Peak because there's a radio tower up there. We maintain it, and that's where it is." And so we drove there. We got to the base. I don't know if you can tell by the profile there, but it was very steep. There was hardly a road, and it was very, very, very rocky. I was nervous to take my little Xterra up there. But we got to the base, and he said, "Yeah, this is it, this is it." And I said, "Okay, well, I don't know if I should make it." And he goes, "Let's just go for it." And what I thought he meant was just gun it and get over these big rocks. What he meant to say was, let's just hop out of the truck and go hike it. So I gunned it, and we went up to the top, and I made it. My poor Xterra made it up there. It was okay. Got to the top, and I pulled out my phone, and I'm like, okay, I don't see a pin. And I know what you guys, some of you may not know what I mean by I don't see a pin, but on the right of this slide here, when you open up SOTA and you want to see where you're at in relation to where you should be, there's a red arrow there on the upper right, and there's a little button there it's pointing to. If you push that button and you have SOTA open, it'll zoom right into where you're at based on GPS. And so I did that, and there was no pin, which meant that I was not in the activation zone or anywhere near it. And so lesson learned, and one of the first lessons that I wanted to share with you guys today, and that is, if you're going to do a SOTA summit, make sure you know where the eligible activation zone is and get there and not someplace else that you think is there. We figured it out, though, and let me go back one slide. 2 slides. Let me see here if I go back. So there's the green line you can barely make out, probably. We didn't know, actually, that there was a drive-up, that Matthews Peak was a drive-up. We thought it was a hike. First we thought it was a drive-up, and then we realized we were at the wrong place. And then we thought, okay, we need to get over there, and we didn't have any data on where over there was, so we just kind of drove that way as far as we could, got out of the truck, and then just hiked to the Matthews Peak. And when we got there to the top, we saw the road, and I'm like, oh, this is a drive-up. But that's okay. So anyway, let me advance this back now again, the other way. I'm not a skilled PowerPoint professional, as you know, it looks like. Okay, so this is the activating Matthews Peak. It was the first activation. On all the activations I did with Herb, I made sure that he was allowed to be the first one to activate. I know when you do joint activations, I thought that when you do joint activation, you should let the other person go, and that person, whoever goes first, is the one who gets credit for the first activation. As it turns out, it must be a change in the database. If you activate at the same time, you get dual credit. But I still let him go first. But he had a great time. He operated sideband. I operated Morse code. And this is just kind of a look. This middle picture here is that if you can see the bump, you probably can't see it very well, but that's where my truck was when we on that ledge there when we went to the wrong peak. All right, let's see here. Okay, second summit I did out there was called Yale Point. And so I said, do you know where Yale Point is? And he said, yes. And I said, how do you know? He says, oh, there's all kinds of antennas up there. And I said, okay. And this was a long drive. So the arrow on the right is where Lukachukai is, and the arrow on the left is where Yale Point is. And I think it was at least a 2.5, 3 hour drive to get to those radio towers. And you can see on the left, there's a little map there, and there's a red X, and then there's a green pin. And which one do you think we went to? We went to the red X, where all the radio towers are. You can kind of see it written down there, radio towers. And when we arrived there, I realized there was no pin. So, again. So this is what it kind of looked like. This picture in the middle is not where we were hiking. I couldn't find a picture of where we were hiking, but it's very similar, and it is a section of Yale Point. But what we had to do on Yale Point is we had to drive back down to the bottom of this mountain, and then from there we had to figure out how to get over to Yale Point, which actually, there's a road on the map, but there isn't one that you can see when you're actually there, physically there. And so I'm like, I don't know what we're going to do. And he's like, well, just gun it. Just go through there. And I'm like, okay. So since Herb says so, I went through this little pasture area, which I probably shouldn't have done, but he said it was okay. And we found the road. And so then we took this horrible road kind of up through this canyon, and we stopped. And this wall here that you see is kind of what we were facing on both sides. It was just this canyon. And so we kind of looked at the contour map, and we thought we could get up at a certain way, and we were lucky that we were able to, because we didn't do a lot of research, obviously, because that's not where we thought we were going. Second lesson is, okay, first lesson, don't do it twice. Don't go to the wrong summit twice. The second lesson is, if you find that you're not in the place you should be, if you can safely make an alternative plan and get there, then do it. If you can't, then don't. And so we thought, we're just going to take it a little at a time. We did find a place that was a little rocky and a little precarious, but we found a chute, so to speak, that we could climb up into, and then we got on top of this flat plateau, and we hiked probably for a mile to the end to where the activation zone was. And so we did it. That was the second never before activated summit. There's Herb again doing sideband, and then I followed on CW, had a good time. All right, so let's move this to the next slide. Okay, I went out there again a few months later, and because I wanted to get some more never activated summits. And again, you can see this map. It was a map I showed you before where it's kind of the Navajo Nation boundaries. You can see the arrow there that's pointing kind of to the south of that boundary line. That's where I went the second time. The first time was up more towards Four Corners. This time it was down south. And this time I didn't spend the night. It was a day trip. It was I think it was around 3.5, 4 hour drive for me to that point where those two summits are, and about 3 hours for him to come down to where I was at. We met halfway kind of, and we picked these two summits, 5 buttes and then a numbered peak. And there was a challenge with these two, a different challenge. It wasn't the pin this time. If you can look at that, so let's look at the one on the right first. If you can see on the right, there's basically a wall all the way around this mesa, okay? And if you look at the aerial view, you can see that it's really interesting and would be very challenging to get up there. But something that I learned from Brian and a few others, Brian's here with me, maybe some JT, is that if you look at the aerial maps and you zoom in on the aerial maps, sometimes you can find paths where people have been, especially in the desert. It's not so easy out east here because you got trees and stuff like that. You still can sometimes, but out west, there's no trees, so you can zoom in and you can kind of see trails sometimes. And so we did that, and we found a path that we thought we could take. And so, and also a road that we could take almost to that face part. So drive kind of up to there. With our plan was to drive up and then to hop out and see what it was like. And we said, if not, backup plan, we'll go to a different peak and try again. If not, we'll go to a third peak. So we had a backup plan this time, but we were lucky. We hiked up and we were able to find the crevice. And this is Herb right here, kind of on the right, kind of going up that chute that we found. And it was actually a well-maintained trail, not a well-maintained trail, but it's a trail that other people had obviously had got on top with. And so once we got on top, then it looked like we were just in a field. It was probably the size of this whole fairground, but it was just flat. And you wouldn't even know you were on a mesa. And I think that the whole mesa was the activation zone. But I told Herb we should go to the pin just because that's what SOTA people do. Not all the time, but anyway, so we did. We went there. There was no trees up on top at all, nothing to tie down to. So we ended up tying down to, on the right, you can see, there's just some brush there, and I just stuck my antenna in there, and we did the best we could. But we made the contacts, same thing, he was on sideband. You can see here on the bottom left, I'm doing Morse code, sitting down with my big sun hat and my sleeved shirt, which I always wear in the sun because I hate wearing sunblock, so that's what I do. All right, let's see. We're getting there. All right, peak 6315. That one was pretty much the same thing. The only thing that was interesting in this one that I hadn't seen before was this sweat lodge. And we drove up, and we pretty much followed the path that we thought we were going to get to. We got to the top, but on the way we passed, it wasn't this one, but it was almost identical to this one, a sweat lodge. And Herb talked to me a little bit about the Navajo's traditions and what they do with the sweat lodge. And I can't remember everything that he talked about, but basically 2 or 3 people get in the sweat lodge. They get it really hot, and sometimes it's ceremonial, and sometimes it's for physical health. But they don't do it as much as they used to, but it's part of their ceremonies. And it was fascinating because this is obviously a sweat lodge that had been used a long time ago, and he verified that. So that was cool. So same thing, we found a kind of a route to get to the top, get through that wall, and had a good activation. Same thing, it's a little bit more hilly on this one, but still quite flat. All right. Okay, so that's it. We're going to hold the questions unless you want me to answer some. Okay, let's. I could take some questions, and then we'll turn the time over to Keith. Yeah, go ahead, Paula.
I'm assuming you were probably relying more on Herb, and therefore felt less compelled to do the kind of planning you might normally do.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because that's. I want to talk a little about that real quick. So yes, Herb. Yes, thank you for that. She was asking. She said that Herb was probably less experienced than I, but he was the one in Navajo Nation, so I was probably relying on him for finding the directions and stuff like that. And really what was happening was I was his Elmer in this case. He had never done a Summits on the Air activation. So I was not trying to do it myself. I was trying to let him plan it, and so I gave him the tools. And I said, okay, here's SOTLess, the website. Here's, go zoom in on the peak and then, look at the aerial. And I tried to give him the tools, and he said, yeah, I got it.